Films centered around Black Americans have grown quite popular within recent decades, with movies such as Moonlight, Get Out, King Richard, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Precious being nominated for and winning multiple awards. Directors and actors like Jordan Peele, Angela Bassett, Spike Lee, Daniel Kaluuya, Keke Palmer. Daniel Kaluuya is not American. Okay. They're all universally loved for their work. Black cinema growing more prevalent in pop culture is an amazing thing for the Black community, but what a lot of people don't know of is the complex history behind this moment in the industry. Throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s, Black people were portrayed in media by racist caricatures, such as Mammies, Uncle Toms, Bucks, and Pickaninnies. When the moving picture was introduced, Black characters were either portrayed by white people in blackface, or they were slaves or maids. Blackface is theatrical makeup used by non-Black people to impersonate and or mock Black people in an insensitive way. Wooing and Wedding of a Coon 1904, The Slave 1905, and the Sambo series 1909 to 1911 are some examples of blackface in early cinema. Throughout the years, blackface stopped being used as much, but in recent decades, it started being used again in derogatory portrayals of Black people. Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder 2008, or C. Thomas Howell in Soul Man 1986, and even late-night talk show hosts in comedy shows of the early 2000s. Along with these racist caricatures and depictions came different stereotypes of Black men and women that are still kind of used in media today. In early cinema, the only depiction of Black Americans allowed on screen were slaves and housemaids, also known as Mammies and Uncle Toms. This depicted Black men and women who were skilled domestic workers, slaves, who were loyal to their slave holders. I believe the earliest depictions of the Mammy and Uncle Tom were used in Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is also where the term Uncle Tom was coined. Another stereotype is the Jezebel Sapphire stereotype, better known as the angry Black woman. This depicts Black women as loud, dominant, angry, violent, and also promiscuous, lustful. It's just an over-sexualized caricature of Black women. The Mandingo is another heavily sexualized caricature. It was made up by slave owners to portray Black men as animalistic and inhumane. As time went on in the industry, Black people started to be portrayed more accurately to how they act and as actual functioning members of society. And recently, especially Black filmmakers, they've made sure that Black people are actually correctly represented in media so that it could get rid of all the preconceived notions that non-Black people have on white people from reading books, watching TV, and movies. Black Americans have also created some of their own subgenres of film. Some examples of these genres are blaxploitation, race film, hood film, and Afrofuturism. Blaxploitation is a subgenre of exploitation film that became popular in America in the late 60s and early 70s. It was originally aimed at Black audiences, but soon it began to trickle into everybody. It was for everybody. In these films, Black people are the main protagonists rather than being the sidekick or a victim of brutality. Blaxploitation also shares a lot of similarities with race film, which was a genre of film that took place between 1915 to 1950. It featured all Black casts, they were catered to all Black audiences, and this was a genre because Black people weren't allowed in white cinemas due to the segregation laws, and Black people were also not allowed to be the main characters of film. Afrofuturism is the incorporation of African diaspora. Afrofuturism is the incorporation of African diaspora culture into different types of genres like science fiction, fantasy, and magical realism. Afrofuturism is prevalent in all forms of media, but especially film. Hood film is a genre of film that originated in the 1990s that focused on urban African American and Hispanic culture. It focused on the problem that the people in these cultures faced, like racial discrimination, gang affiliation, drug affiliation, and poverty. Usually, these films can also be classified as coming-of-age movies. Black filmmakers have also taken over most of these genres with their own iconic rendition of classic film tropes. There have been popular Black horror films, Black romance films, action, comedy, drama. Every genre has their own film or TV show made by Black filmmakers catering to Black audiences. Black people in the film industry have experienced a lot of their first later than the white people in the industry have. For example, some of the first Black movie stars were Sidney Poitier, Stephen Fetchit, Butterfly McQueen, Dorothy Dandridge, and Juanita Moore, starting their careers in acting from 1925 to 1946, while some of the first white movie stars started their careers in 1899 to 1906, much later than when Black movie stars were even thought of. The very first black film director was Oscar Micheaux, who released his first film, The Homesteader, in 1919. The silent film was adapted from his first novel, The Conquest, published in 1913. The film follows a black man named Jean-Baptiste who falls in love with many white women but doesn't marry any of them out of loyalty to his race. When he sought out to find love within his own race, he finds a black woman and marries her, but then their relationship slowly starts to crumble due to her father keeping them apart. The woman kills her father than herself for keeping her and her husband apart. To help him through it all, Jean rekindled an old love with a white woman, and the white woman turned out being mixed race. Upon finding out that his new love was of African descent, he was finally satisfied and decided to marry her. The end. In 1910, William D. Foster became the very first black man to found his own film production company. It was called Foster Photoplay Company, and it was based in Chicago. The company only lasted 3 years, but it produced some of the very first slapstick comedies with primarily black casts that also didn't perpetuate negative stereotypes about black people. It made films such as The Railroad Porter, The Fall Guy, The Butler, and The Grafter and the Maid. In 1940, Hattie McDaniel was the very first black person to win an Oscar for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind in 1939. While this is a very monumental moment in black cinema history, there's very ambivalent feelings surrounding the situation. The role she plays is explicitly racist and degrading, and so was the movie. And she wasn't even invited to the movie premiere since it was whites only due to Georgia's segregation laws. But lastly, one of Hollywood's very first female action movie stars was actually a black woman, Pam Grier. She was the lead in films like Coffee, 1973, Foxy Brown, 1974, The Big Dollhouse, 1971, and Black Mama, White Mama, 1973. And the first black person to star in their own television show was Ethel Waters with The Ethel Waters Show in 1939. These women have broke grounds for black people in the film industry and the film industry in general. Without them, a lot of the shows and movies we have today wouldn't be the same. Today, we have more representation in film and television than ever before, with some of the best black actors and actresses starring in the biggest films and television shows, and some of the best films being made by black directors. Black characters don't portray negative stereotypes anymore, and a lot of films speaking out against racism are getting the recognition that they've always needed. Early black cinema was revolutionary, and it paved the way for a lot of the elements used in film and television today. So the next time you watch your favorite movie or TV show, or you tune into an interview with one of your favorite actors, actresses, or directors, you should think about how early black cinema has impacted or inspired their work. Thank you.